Joining us now, Jeff Paterson of Rinkwide Vancouver, covered the loss to the Dallas Stars last night. He'll be back at it Sunday and matinee Sunday against the Anaheim Ducks. Jeff, how are we doing?
Well, I see that the pilot has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign here for the final handful of games for the Vancouver Canucks. A little bumpy. There's some turbulence in the air here as they've scuffled their way to the end of the homestand and obviously invited the Oilers back into this discussion about top spot in the Pacific Division.
Yeah, so what's your concern level there? I mean, Edmonton, go ahead.
It's huge. You got to score some goals. Like, hey, you can say defense wins championships, but you can't win games 0-0. And ask the Dallas Stars of 2007 how that worked when they had the 3 shutouts against the Canucks, but ended up losing in 7 games because they just couldn't score enough goals on Roberto Luongo. So there's still time. I mean, I keep coming back to that. There's time for Lindholm to maybe get healthy. There's time to rest up Thatcher Demko. There is time to sort through some of these issues, but my goodness, these last couple of games against good quality teams that are going to be there in the playoffs as well, it leaves you wondering where exactly has the offense gone for the Vancouver Canucks.
You mentioned can't score goals. Now, 5-on-5, we can definitely see that. Obviously, JT Miller having to play with who he had to play with yesterday, Archdeep Bains and Sam Lafferty. But Jeff, let's see the writing on the wall here and the power play and its troubles and its continued troubles. What's the level of concern, obviously, in these parts and for people covering the team is huge. What don't you like about the Canucks power play right now?
Well, I don't like the attitude of the players and even the coach who continues, and maybe this is just the psyche of pro athletes, but they refuse to see this as an issue. They keep saying that it's not a big deal, that things ebb and flow. But sorry, when you're 29th in the NHL over basically a third of the season, that's an issue. And, one thing that's not getting talked about enough, guys, is Brock Besser doesn't have a power play goal this month. Like, forget the homestand. Extend that beyond to the 3-game road trip that started the month here. Leads the Canucks with 15 power play goals on the season. And this is more of an indictment of the players around Brock Besser. We know that Brock doesn't create on his own. Brock is at his best when he's in concert with others. He needs the puck in scoring areas. Well, Brock's established himself. He's had a really good season, 37 goals, 15 on the power play. And we've talked about this notion of him being one of the better net front guys in the NHL this year with tips and screens and rebounds. And what that tells me is that pucks are not getting funneled to the front of the net for Brock Besser to do what he does best. So, yeah, you look and you say 11 games without a power play goal for Brock Besser. How can that make sense? Well, it makes sense because they're not getting pucks anywhere close to the net. They had 6 minutes of power play time against the Stars and managed 4 shots on goal. Like, think about that, 6 minutes with the man advantage. Most of it spent in the offensive end. Obviously, you have to do the odd retrieval. But 6 minutes of power play time, and you can only get 4 pucks to the front of the net. And I can't even remember quality scoring chances or really even many good looks with the man advantage. So if it's going back to the drawing board, I think what's worked for you this season, well, Brock Besser has worked well on the power play. Figure out a way to get him involved here over these final few games of the season.
Well, then we'll ask you the Tim Hortons poll question, Jeff. Will they get it fixed by the playoffs? And I'd also like you to expand on what Talk had said this week about why Nils Höglander hasn't gotten a shot there.
Do I have confidence? No, because I've watched them bang their head against the wall and continue to trot out the same looks, essentially. Look, I don't want to dump on Pius Suter, but he's not the answer. And it's not really his fault. He's being asked to do more than could possibly have been expected of him. But as that left shot bumper option, he's not the guy. And you've seen a few times, and look, Jamie Benn, he was the bumper option for the Dallas Stars. Bang, bang, back of the net. Again, Pius Suter is doing what's being asked of him, and he's, the coach taps him on the shoulder, you're going to go play, but not a lot of finish there. He has 1 goal in his last 25 games, by the way, and it came at even strength. So he hasn't scored on the power play in a long time, and that goes for a lot of these guys, obviously, just 4 goals on the power play this month. So, I have said I don't know the downside of trying Nils Höglander in that spot. And yet Rick Tocchet was asked point blank about it after the morning skate on Thursday by Farhan. And Tocchet, he started down this road of, well, we tried Höglander on PP2 on the left half wall, and there have been a couple of, and then he stopped and he changed course and he didn't really finish his sentence. But it was pretty clear that there were a couple of instances that they didn't like what they saw. But nobody's asking Nils Höglander to be the half wall guy. If it's about hammering pucks from the bumper, I just don't see the downside of trying it. If it doesn't work, then look for plan Well, it wouldn't be plan B by then. they're
Yeah.
well on to
C, D,
Yeah,
exactly.
E, F.
We'll
Yeah,
do our
we're-
alphabet here. But I just think it's time. Like the four guys that they've got, they're going to stay out there. And then it's a question of finding that fifth. And I still think there is a little bit of time here to audition. But yeah, I mean, Tocchet then went on to say that, look, too many people in this market are trying to press Höglander into positions that he's maybe not ready for. I thought a pretty throaty defense of the Canucks stance where Tocchet said, like, we think we're handling this guy properly. But he does have 22 goals on the season. He knows where the net is. If it comes to puck retrieval, he wins his fair share of battles. And if it's about getting greasy and heading for a loose puck that's lying in the blue paint, I think Nils Höglander could be your guy as well. So I don't see the downside. And that's, if they're not willing to experiment and try and sort of broaden their horizons, then no, I don't have a ton of confidence that they're going to get this corrected. And ultimately, we could be looking at the downfall of what was a once high-scoring Vancouver Canuck team when the playoffs begin next month.
What do we think the chances are they're going to have an assistant on the bench next year with power play responsibilities? Because the head coach is still handling things, right, Jeff? Is that not the way they've got it set up, that it's Rick Tocchet and JT Miller?
Yeah, I don't think it matters where the assistant is. This team has more assistant coaches on the ice than I've ever seen in my time covering the Vancouver. Like, they have 8 coaches out on the ice sometimes, which is incredible. I've seen other people that cover the NHL come to town and they remark, I see it in social, or the Canucks have 8 coaches on the ice. This is wild. I mean, it looked like a football team, and look, maybe hockey's been slow on the uptake in that regard. I don't think it matters where the coach is positioned. The work is done in the video room. It's done on the practice ice. And then ultimately it does come down to execution. And it's wild that a 90-point guy in JT Miller and a couple of 80-point guys in Paterson and Hughes and a near 40-goal scorer in Brock Besser can just be this ineffective right now working with the power play.
So it's going to be like the NBA where you have that second bench of coaches behind the actual bench. We're going to have to tell Francesco those first row seats, the coaches are coming for them.
Of those 8 guys on the ice as well, I mean, there's a lot of them that had some success on the power play. So you'd think that this one would be a lot better. Jeff, I want to ask you, Dakota Joshua skated with JT Miller and Brock Besser in practice. Come game time, they reunite that third line. Were you surprised to see that? Or was it more of a case of you had to put JT Miller, just the way the centers worked, with a guy like Archie Bains because you didn't want to bury him down the lineup?
Yeah, I think there was some of that, Irf. But look, I was surprised. Not surprised that Rick Tocchet would get back to Bluger, Garland, and Joshua at some point. But here's Dakota Joshua. He's been out for 6 weeks, and you practice him one day with JT Miller and Brock Besser, and then you plug him back in hoping that chemistry is going to automatically and magically reappear. And Joshua was fine. Like, he was physical. He didn't look out of place. Didn't look like he had missed a lot of time. But yeah, when they warmed up, and I thought, oh my goodness, the heavy lifting that you're asking JT Miller with Lafferty and Bains. And look, Archie drew a couple of penalties. I thought the speed was there. I thought he looked a little more comfortable than he did in the first go round. But that said, he's one of 12 forwards out there and certainly wasn't expecting a lot of offense from him. And unfortunately right now, that holds true for so many of them. And for a guy like Elias Pettersson, I'm not sure that he's had a better set of wingers all season long than Brock Besser on one side and his buddy Nils Höglander on the other. Now, Petey somehow finished the night, according to the stat sheet, with 11 shot attempts, which was mind-boggling to me because he had the 4-on-4 chance where he was set up by Garland in the first period, and that was about as noticeable as I recall, other than him doing the big snow angel on the Dallas first goal. So I really was surprised that he and Hughes combined for 21 shot attempts in the hockey game. But there's got to be a bottom line. And you can't, for the longest time there, when Paterson was carrying Ilya Mikheyev, it was sort of understandable. But he had Besser, the leading goal scorer, and Höglander, who has been one of their better finishers, certainly in the second half of the season. And that line had to do something and ultimately was unable to help the cause last night.
A lot of fans screaming about officiating last night, Jeff. What's your take there?
Boy, I have watched the replay of Jason Robertson batting that puck 100 times. And honestly, he's sort of leaning. Is the puck above his one shoulder? Yes. Is it above the other shoulder? I'm not so sure. Like, that one felt like a 50-50. And I did think the longer it went, and it was a lengthy delay in arena, I kind of thought they would find an angle that would help the Canucks in that one. And so I was a little surprised, I suppose. There were some other things along the way. Dakota Joshua got tangled up with Miro Heiskanen in the third period there. Certainly looked like contact before the puck arrived on the part of the Stars defenseman. Joshua, after the game, downplayed it, said we kind of tangled skates, and he wasn't really pushing for a penalty there. Whatever the case, we hear the ref suck chant all the time at Rogers Arena when your team's on the wrong end of the scoreline. I get the growly fans, but to me, it tracks back to 3 power plays, 4 shots on goal, no goals, and Dallas scored twice on the power play. So, the Canucks a little undisciplined with some of the penalties. Obviously, Teddy Bluger, he gets the stick up late in the game. To me, that one was a call, and you needed a kill, and they couldn't get it in that moment. So the Canucks took 4 power plays, and the coach's challenge cost them a 5th one. So officially, Dallas went 2 for 5 on the night with the man advantage. But to me, the Canucks had 3 power plays. It wasn't like the power plays were 5-1 or 5-0. The Canucks had opportunities and just did nothing with them.
I feel like those undisciplined plays that Rick Tocchet talks about are now becoming something that he talks about post-game all the time with the Canucks here.
A little bit, a month ago all the time, and then they got better out on that road trip, and we all applauded them. That was a part of their success. Stay out of the box, don't give power plays, and look what they did, those wins in Los Angeles and Vegas, and then came home and spanked Winnipeg. But yes, it's kind of crept back into their game a little bit here, and so something to monitor, something to watch. And talked about, when you're not moving your feet, you're a step behind, you're putting the hands and the sticks on guys. I think there was an element of that. Canucks need to play on their toes a little bit more here. And part of that, their fabric all season has been get the lead and extend it. Fell behind against Los Angeles and couldn't punch their way out of that blanket. And again, fell behind. I thought when they tied it at 1, I kind of thought, there you go. That's your entry point. The crowd's into it. You've broken through. I thought they would harness the energy in the building and momentum, and obviously it didn't happen. They had a few chances in that second period. But discipline's going to be key. If you take a couple penalties in a game, obviously you help you're not leaning on the same guys to do the penalty killing. You get everybody involved. Again, I think that was a big part of that road trip at the start of the month was rolling 4 lines, getting everybody into the hockey game, all those types of things. And the more penalties you take, the more you're leaning on a select group. And let's be honest, guys, I think they could have used Elias Lindholm in their lineup, killing as many penalties, the face-off prowess, all that kind of stuff. So he's not available to them right now. You got to push on. But all of a sudden, Sunday's game against Anaheim takes on some significance now. If they lose to the Ducks, who play in Edmonton on Saturday afternoon, it'll be 3-4, 4-6 for the Ducks at the end of a long line on the road this week. Guys, if they lose to Anaheim, they will be under 500 on this homestand. A chance to absolutely put the hammer down and lock up everything available to them. So suddenly there's a little heft here on Easter Sunday afternoon.
So I know there was talk about Artur Silovs. Can you go to Silovs here, or is it got to be DeSmith given the stakes?
Yeah, full off day for them here on Friday, so we're not going to get an answer to that. And with no morning skate on Sunday, it may go right down to warm-up time, essentially, to find out who leads the Canucks out onto the ice. All along, this one just felt like Casey DeSmith's played 7 straight starts, appeared in 8 since Demko went down. It just felt like the time was right and the opponent was right, but I'm not so sure now. Although Tocchet did say after the morning skate on Thursday that he and Ian Clark had talked and that, yes, they were going to get Silovs into a game here. So maybe that holds. And, if you can't beat the Ducks with, I don't know what kind of performance you're going to get from Artur Silovs, but he was fine last year in the 5 games he played in the National Hockey League. But this is, I do think there's a decision now where a win over Dallas was a no doubt slam dunk Silovs on Sunday. I'm not sure that it is as simple as that. And I just let me throw this in here too, guys, about Casey DeSmith, who has given the Canucks a chance to win every game here since he took over from Thatcher Demko. Hasn't given up more than 3 in regulation, gave up 4 to the Colorado Avalanche, the overtime goal on the power play. That said, 3-3-1 since taking over from Demko. The 3 wins against Calgary, against Montreal, against Buffalo. The 3 losses against Washington, against Los Angeles, against Dallas, and against the Avalanche. What do those 4 teams have that the other 3 don't? The 4 teams are above the playoff bar. The 3 teams that DeSmith has beaten are all below the playoff bar. Casey DeSmith has not beaten a team currently in a playoff position since a win in Nashville the week before Christmas. So if the Canucks are going to win the Pacific Division, They still have 2 to go against Vegas. They've got a game in Los Angeles. They've got a game against Edmonton. Maybe Demko's back for that one. But Casey DeSmith's going to have to author a signature victory here at some point. It's just a numbers game. And if they're going to win the Pacific Division, they're going to need some wins from Casey DeSmith. So he can't be expected to score goals. He certainly can't be expected to run the power play, although maybe he'd be all right in the bumper. Who knows? But you just, is it too much to ask your backup goaltender, who's become the de facto starter, to steal you a good win somewhere along the line? That's something that has not happened with Casey DeSmith this season. Check that, but he did in Edmonton.
Edmonton, game 2, Jeff. Game 2
since Christmas
in the Alberta capital. And here's the other thing: they are going to have another opportunity to play Silovs if they want on Wednesday in Arizona, right? You've got a back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday, Vegas, Arizona. So maybe that's the spot.
So let me float this one at you, because somebody came at me on social and planted this in my sort of head and hasn't left, that the most important games remaining on the schedule for the Vancouver Canucks are 2 against Arizona, 1 against Anaheim, 1 against Calgary. Like, they need those 4 wins. What if you play Silovs in Vegas and throw a bit of a curve to the Golden Knights, a team that you could well see in the first round of the playoffs, and save DeSmith for the game in Arizona, which is back-to-back? Like, that's the one that they cannot afford to slip up against the 4 minnows, essentially, that remain on their schedule, and then they're going to have to find some other wins. So just some food for thought there, but it wasn't the craziest notion that I had considered.
No, not in the least.
Yeah, I think that they protect Silovs a little bit and just not have to go into the fortress, and you know how they get on you there. And I agree that probably is a game that they're going to want. Jeff, I got to ask you this. There's a handful of games remaining, and you look at the schedule, and this team has just been so checked in and so dialed and so dominant at certain points of this season. Is it fair to say maybe it's kind of just like waiting for the playoffs now for this group? And every game is not going through the motions. You want to play well, you got to do things, but everyone has that, end of the line or light at the end of the tunnel, which is the playoffs. Maybe guys are a little bit, I don't want to say checked out, but maybe it's just not all there.
I hope not. To me, the dog days are coming out of the All-Star break, where you've spent time, the ones that didn't go to the All-Star game, you've been on a beach. You probably would like to have extended that, by another week. You can't do that. You get back at it, and they had that tough stretch of 10 games and 17 nights out of the All-Star break and kind of hit the wall there. And then this was supposed to be, fuel for their fire. 9 straight at home, put the suitcases away, days off, rest days, practice days, all those types of things. And really through it all, they've kind of barely managed to keep their head above water. And yes, they've been without their starting goaltender. And yes, they've been without their key trade acquisition. But there's enough pieces there that, it is a little troubling to me. And yes, power play is the top priority, but Brock Besser had 24 goals at Christmas. He's got 13 since. Like, his production has basically dropped in half over the second half. Elias Paterson, he got 6 goals since the All-Star break, and one of them into an empty net the other night against Buffalo. And he had the big game against Buffalo, and I think we all thought, like, there it is, he's back, and really hasn't been a whole lot of flash in his game since. So JT Miller has been consistent throughout. Connor Garland, the pass that he makes, the play that he makes there on the only goal the Canucks score. Garland's going, Hoaglander's been going, but there just aren't enough guys to the point, and I tweeted this out, that 6 of their 12 forwards last night had 1 or no goals since the All-Star break. Half the forward group. Now, Joshua hasn't played a lot, and Archie Baines hasn't, but Podkolzin and Bluger and Suter and Mikheyev. Ilya Mikheyev, guys, 1 goal in 41 games. Hockey season is 82 games long. He's on a 2-goal pace over the last 41 games.
So then tell me this, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
They need a hero on the wing. We know. We've known this for some time, that most likely to step up and be that hero on the wing.
I'd like to think that Elias Pettersson could make whoever's on his wing that hero, to get him back and playing like he did for, one night only, limited engagement against Buffalo. They need that, Petey, for a run here over the final bunch of games and into the playoffs, obviously. Again, Besser picking up his pace. Now, the power play would go a long way to helping him. I want to see him get to 40. He's at 37. He's close. He got a bounce the other night against the Kings, and he's got time. But, ultimately, it's not just going to happen because you want it to happen. guys have to get out there and make it happen. So when you're looking at scoring heroes, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty select group to try to figure out who's going to come through for them. You know what might help? Quinn Hughes has skated miles on the homestand and tried to make things happen. Philip Hronek, the guy that wants the $8 million, doesn't have a point in the last 10 games for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, I heard Ferraro say he thought it was his best game in weeks, though, last night. Did we like Hronek last night to that level?
I mean, 5-on-5, they didn't give up a goal. The effort wasn't terrible. The performance wasn't terrible, but there are special teams involved. They went back to Hughes and Hronek, and you can understand why, trying to juice that offense, but it didn't necessarily work out. The one thing about Hronek that I don't get, guys, is for all the talk of the big heavy shot, and NHL Edge backs that up. I mean, he does have one of the best shots on this team. You would think a heavy shot once in a while would beat a goaltender cleanly, but beyond that, would produce some rebounds that a goalie just can't handle. And then there'd be that loose change. And that doesn't seem to happen with Philip. He only has 13 shots on goal through the 8 games of the homestand so far. So for a guy that's billed as having this big shot, I'd like to see him use it a little bit more than he has. So they take contributions from anywhere. It doesn't just have to be the forwards. Hronek's had a nice season, but as the heat sort of gone up around him and all the contract talk and everything else, his performance has sort of faded away here just a little bit. I think there's more for him to give over the final bunch of games.
Marvelous stuff, Jeff. We'll be listening Sunday, Easter Sunday, after the matinee against the Ducks, and no show for us Monday, but we'll talk to you on Tuesday.
All right, guys. Have yourself a happy Easter long weekend, and we'll catch up early next week.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.